Hello, Internet. This is the February 3rd JupyterLab and Jupyter Notebook Dev meeting. And today we have a smaller crew than normal. And we don't yet have our hackpad, so I'm not sure who should go first. So I will nominate Steve and ask, actually, you know what? No, we normally do PM first, don't we? So Jamie or Brian, do you guys have any administrative things to talk about?
I do not. Nothing major to share with the JupyterLab team this week. I'm working on a diagram for the whole project, and I will reveal that next Tuesday.
Okay, cool. Brian, anything?
I've been in serious teaching and administrative bureaucracy type stuff this week, so it's been a very I've gotten a lot done, but nothing that feels productive, let's put it that way.
Fair enough.
I don't, yeah.
Okay. I think I'll go. I've mostly been thinking about Completer this week. Both there were some bugs. I think there's still one outstanding bug, and also just the notion of how do we add functionality to JupyterLab if we're thinking as though we are third-party plugin authors instead of thinking as though we're JupyterLab creators. So one of the things that came out of building the tooltip widget was having it be completely isolated to a plugin. And so I was actually going to try to do the same thing with Completer, but I saw like lower hanging fruit was the inspection widget. So right now, both the Notebook plugin and the console plugin had listeners on their own individual instance trackers, and they were basically manually swapping out the source of the inspection handler. But really, if you think about who might have created the inspection handler instead of us, it might have been just some third-party plugin that wouldn't go modifying Notebook and console. So I moved that manual swapping into the inspection handler plugin. There's still like the actual creation of an inspection handler happens inside the individual Notebook and console. And I'm looking at that now to see if that can be extracted or not. It might just be that it's too embedded and we can't. The more I can pull out, the more I think it's a better proof of concept for what other people will do going forward. And I want to look at the completer in the same way. And at the same time, just we have maybe one or two rendering bugs that I want to try to quash. That's what I've been working on. Steve, do you want to go next?
Sure. This week, mostly been working on the implementation of the cell metadata editor. Thus far, we have the basic outline in that there's a view of the current cell at the top, a text area that has the full JSON dump of the metadata, and then individual tools. Right now, the two that are there there's a very simple way to instantiate a selector based on what was in the previous notebook, and that you give it the key, the metadata key you're looking for, and a set of option name value pairs. And so it creates a selector widget for you, and as you change the drop down, it feeds the metadata and vice versa. So we've got that done for slideshow and MB convert types. There's some discussion that we can have about the semantics of editing that raw JSON blob and what that needs to look like. We can talk about that after Jason goes, if you like, or now. Either way, what do you think, Jason?
I'm really quick. I've been working on widgets. We put our new widgets beta in front of some users and immediately got some feedback like, I tried to do this and it didn't work. Okay, back to the drawing board. So I've been just plaguing ahead. Sylvan's also been plaguing ahead on widgets, fixing some issues, trying to really try to push ahead on issues for 6.0. The one big thing for widgets was we still have a question of Notebook 4.4 release. There's a backport for the output widgets that makes widgets and interact and et cetera work in Notebook 4X. We could release a 4.4 that just has that one backport. It's not an issue right now because 6.0 is not released, but once Widgets 6.0 gets released, either I think we should release a Notebook 4.4, or if 5.0 has been out for a long time, there may not be a need. But if 5.0 hasn't been out for a long time, or if the adoption's not what we think it should be, then I think we should release a 4.4.
Cool.
So Ethan,
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I briefly saw that Cameron was doing some design work for widgets. Have you been working with him on that?
I haven't been working with him on that. I didn't know if he's kept doing it. I just changed a bunch of stuff this morning because I realized that setting the width on a widget didn't work. And so that might have affected a bunch of the widths and stuff like that, the way I re-architected things. So I'll get together with him and double check what he's doing and tell him to update to the newest version, which might change some of the CSS that he's doing.
Okay, yeah, I know he showed me like some quick, just some work he'd been doing, and it looked like things were improving. I've been so busy this week, I've not touched base with him. So.
Okay, yeah. If you see him, tell him to touch base with me. That'd be great. And I'll try to reach out to him too. Never mind.
Yeah, it's been a horrible week schedule-wise for me.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize he was working on it, so thanks for the update.
That's all I wanted to communicate because yeah. Cool.
Hey, Ian, welcome.
Sorry,
that's all right. If you have anything to contribute, it would be your turn right now. So, and if you don't, that's good.
Not a lot to update with. I've been working on restructuring things so that collaborative objects don't exist in a flat namespace anymore, which is going to allow for more complicated objects. And that's proving to be a little tricky. So that's what's up.
Great.
Okay. So Steve mentioned the cell metadata. I think it might be worthwhile to lay out a few options so people can think about it. Basically, he's got an arbitrary data structure that is editable, and we're trying to figure out what level of sophistication we need to offer people, because editing arbitrary data structures, you could have things that generate forms, or there's a lot of ways of doing it basically, or you could just give them a code editor and pretty print it and say go to town. So I don't know, but Steve, you probably have more coherent thoughts on this. What are you thinking, and what is everyone else thinking?
I'll just lay out what Darren and I had proposed the other day, in that we stick with a raw text area, but make it clearer in terms of what state we're in, so that if we're focused in the text area, that is considered live mode, and it doesn't change the data structure under us, even if the actual underlying structure changes. And at the point you make a change is when it's considered dirty. We have some kind of indication of that. Some buttons come up that either you can accept or revert at that point. If you haven't made any changes, so you just focus in the cell and then you blur the cell and leave, then it should update to the underlying state. If you leave in the midst of editing, it should stay in that dirty state. If you cancel editing, it should be as if it'll just revert to the underlying data structure. And then the point where it gets messy is if you commit, then you have to do this merge presumably whatever the user has entered would take priority at that point. So you'd merge the keys, but allowing what the user has entered to take priority. That assumes that the user's actually entered valid JSON. So we first have to validate the JSON, show some kind of error indication if it's not valid. And then once they finally have committed valid JSON, then we do the deep merge and everything's back to this snapshot state. So that was our thoughts of sort of a cheap way of doing this editing of data that can change from underneath you. That's arbitrary.
Yeah, I think sort of having a commit action probably does make sense. It's too bad we sort of have to implement this from a feature parity perspective.
Well, the feature parity would be to bring up a modal dialog, and that is the action. So that's the existing interface in the.
Yeah, because it's modal.
Now that we're in a side panel, it behooves us to think about what's the right way of doing this in general in a side panel.
So one thing that might help in this, it wouldn't be a modal dialog, but it would be make it slightly more modal, and it might help, would be to allow cell tool plugins to be collapsed so they're not seen, and for cell tool plugins to specify whether they should be open or collapsed by default. And if I can just share my screen real quick, I'll show you what this ends up looking like. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yep.
So let's see. I don't know. Let me do this. Don't save. There we go. So this is the default. When you open up Sketch, you see the inspector on the right side. When you select things, sections tend to be closed, or like by default. The fills, borders, shadows, inner shadows sections are closed. Now, in this case, when you click on them, they open, although you can see still the shadows, inner shadows, and Gaussian blur sections are still closed. And what I'm wondering is if that type of sort of collapse and expand interaction could be used to make the cell metadata, the raw cell editing of that metadata more modal, basically. So it was clear to hear.
This is a partial analogy, but imagine your cursor was inside the position field for 192, right? And as you're in there, the data actually changes because this is a live object. So the sort of life cycle that Steve's describing is, what do you do then? Do you overwrite the 192 to the new value, or do you leave it as 192 because you, the user, have decided to focus on that, meaning you might have a value you want to put in that supersedes anything else? So modal or not, that's actually a possibility. Even in the current notebook, it would be a possibility. It's just it comes more to the fore if both are actually even still visible.
And so in some senses, it boils down to the fact that the metadata is not a fully live object that we can real-time sync. I mean, for objects where we have actual full-blown models, it's not a problem to have multiple views connected to that model. And so it seems like that, right? I mean, if every single metadata field all the way down its hierarchy was a real model, every view would be synced to that view. And so it's the fact that parts of the metadata are opaque blobs that may change.
Well, even if that weren't the case, if you were actively typing and then something else came and edited that same field, even if it were a live model, what would that look like?
I mean, it would be handled just like real-time collaboration will.
Yeah.
I mean, And I mean, it gets horrifically complicated because you're going to have to deal with multiple cursors, but presumably at some point we're going to have, proper full-blown code mirror support for multiple cursors and real-time models and all that. Like that, but the challenge though is if we do that, one, that makes Ian's job a lot more difficult because he's going to have to real-time sync recursively all the way down that metadata structure. And we'll have to do that everywhere in JupyterLab. And so I'm just trying to distill what the source of the problem is. I'm not proposing that we actually make it a full-blown model, but it seems like that's the source of the challenge. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, it is, but I think there's a simpler way of thinking about it. So when I open my text editor, it treats my file like a just blob of just a massive string, right? And then if I do like a git revert or something, and I come back and I have unchanged things in my buffer, my text editor basically gives me a choice. Do you want me to give you what the file actually is, or do you want to just continue? And we can do that basically just ignoring the complexity of actual real-time collaboration, because this is a black box that's changed. It's not a real model. So I think there's like a middle ground where we can basically acknowledge that this thing has been pulled out from under you and let you make a decision yourself.
Yeah, basically keep ours versus keep theirs.
Yeah, and I mean, then we don't really have to worry too much. All we have to decide is what's the interface for this? How do we make sure nobody accidentally loses data? Those are like the two overriding things then.
What level of granularity is the metadata object right now? Is it a single opaque container, or is
by key it's an opaque JSON value?
By key? Okay, so the value, but can you monitor changes to individual keys?
Yes. So if a key's value changes, you can get a notification of that with the name, the old value, and the new value.
Okay, so in principle, we could present this type of choice to the user on a per key value basis, not just the whole metadata blob.
Yep.
That's just the top level key. Right.
Right.
Is your text box presenting each top level key as a separate box, presumably a separate plugin, that has ownership of that key? Or is it just one huge blob for the metadata?
The metadata editor?
Yeah.
The metadata editor is everything. It's just a JSON dump of the entire metadata structure.
Okay.
The slideshow one represents the value of the slideshow key in the metadata, for instance.
Yeah.
Right. Wait. So you have a text box and then a slideshow separate control?
Drop down. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
So as I change that drop down, it's actually updating the metadata.
Got it. So you got two views on the same metadata. You have text boxes, a dump of everything, and then specific controls are actually controlling parts of that text box dump.
Right. And it could be that we make that JSON blob read-only, and there's a completely different way of editing individual keys.
I'd like to point out that, we'll hit this problem again when we talk about settings. It's the exact same sort of thing where different plugins have different settings, and we need an editor that's aware and can update changes and allow editing and merging.
We could have basically a code editor that's set to highlight JSON and set to have like the nice folding and stuff, and has a toolbar. That toolbar has a drop down that gives you all of the top level keys, and it gives you the option to add a key, and the toolbar has a delete button to delete a key. So you're still only editing JSON, but it's broken by keys, and as keys get added, the toolbar automatically populates, if keys get deleted and you're not currently modifying them, they automatically delete. In the single weird instance of you editing the one that happens to have been deleted or modified, then it gives you an indication. But otherwise, it's just a regular text editor with a regular toolbar, and one of the things in the toolbar is the drop down for all the top level things.
Yeah, I was going to suggest looking at what Visual Studio Code is doing with their settings. They've got a really powerful editor for their JSON settings that essentially is just JSON, but there's tons of tools in there to make it easy to navigate and easy to collapse, expand sections, they've got choices. So if you completion and things like that with the JSON that's smart. So it knows the values that need to be in a particular setting, and it'll give you a completion or a drop down. So along those lines, they're making the JSON editor much smarter.
Is it easy for you to show a little bit of that right now, or do you not have it available?
Yeah, just here, give me a second to try to pull up a window. It just came out with a new version of Visual Studio Code that enhances it even more.
Cool. The one thing that we discussed a little bit before the meeting was just the complexity of writing your own JSON editor, or there's a million libraries that do it, but they all come with trade-offs. We would have to basically figure out, all right, what's the interface that's ideal, and then figure out what level of commitment and work it takes to deliver that. Like an arbitrary data structure editor that's user-friendly is itself kind of a big problem. So it's a thing to consider.
Yeah. No, I can see how that would be really useful, but yes, it's probably more than we want to take on at this point.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's Visual Studio Code. I think I have JupyterLab open here. But I go to settings, and here's the settings interface. On the left-hand side is all the default settings. So this is sort of the system-wide configuration. And on the right-hand side is my user settings, and they've also got workspace and language now settings. But you can see, for example, there's sections, collapsible sections. This really is just a JSON file that they've tried to make much easier to deal with. So I can search, so editor, and it just pulls up just the settings that have editor. Let's see, here's a false value. Let's see, if I click the edit button, there's a completion, the true false. Let's see, can be none, same, or indent. And I bet there is, so I can't edit it over here, but I can put it over here. And then you can see I type a quote, and it gives me a completion of what needs to be in that, what could possibly be in that value. Anyway, there's lots of things that they. What?
The list of acceptable values, was it pulling that out of the comment?
No, I bet they have a JSON schema for it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was pulling it out of the comment or if it's a schema. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a schema that they were trying to that they were satisfying here. But the point is, you can make a JSON editor. I've been really impressed with how friendly they've made this JSON editor to edit just what normally is just a huge text file of settings. And I guess up here, workspace, I can do workspace settings versus user settings. Yeah, anyway. So maybe that.
This is definitely a lot nicer than, say, what Sublime Text gives you, which is just the file, just as a regular JSON file. Yeah, look, I actually that what you just showed is a lot closer, I think, to what I personally would like using. We can make a decision on what at least the original, like the initial release, should have, and then whether we make it way nicer or what. Like we basically need some level of this for beta, and then some level of this for 1.0, and then some level of this going forward. So making those decisions, I think, we might come up with a plan that is incremental and nice. But because what you're showing is basically, I think, the sort of the nicest version, but I don't imagine we'll get there right away.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm thinking for the beta, just having a single code mirror editor for the whole metadata, and then if it changes, just give the user one choice, like keep changes or otherwise. And
Yeah.
like keep the other thing I would probably do is put the raw metadata editor at the bottom of the list of cell toolbars and have it collapsed by default. Like I think this is one of those features in the existing notebook that's unfortunate in that I know people use it, and so we can't ditch the feature, but 99, 95% of users never ever touch this. And so it should be like that should be reflected in the UI.
Well, given that, maybe it should just be a button that brings up a modal for now. Like just completely punt on this.
Well, but a modal dialog still doesn't solve the state change problem. In that, in the middle of that modal dialog, the notebook
that already exists in the old notebook. The old notebook, while the modal dialog, whatever you're typing then is what gets committed. So that would be a feature parity just to get us going, and then we can think about how to make the experience better.
Yeah, although the issue with that is that the classic notebook doesn't offer real-time collaboration. And so you never, in the classic notebook,
Neither do we.
Well,
yet.
Yet.
I think Ian might disagree with that.
Well, the point is that we might have to rethink a lot of this once Ian's stuff iterates and evolves. So do we punt now, or do we do some level of thinking that we may have to redo later? I mean, how much do you have for a sidebar? Being able to select multiple cells and change the metadata on multiple cells sounds really powerful, but there's a lot of corner cases in there as well.
Yeah. No, I didn't even touch that. The API is there to let you do that, but it's not reflected in single
cell. I mean,
iTunes does this really interesting thing where no matter what quantity of things you select, when you say get info, it shows you the subset they have in common that you could modify.
Mm-hmm.
So if I selected like all of the songs by an artist, I could set them all to be the same thing, but it's not going to fill out the values for the things that are heterogeneous. It'll only fill out the values for things that they have in common. But Apple's been working on that for 20 years, so.
I mean, yeah, there's lots of programs I think that deal with that sort of thing. Like we talked about, spreadsheet borders are the same sort of thing, where they show some gray value or something for heterogeneous values.
The only, I think I would probably prefer basically what you're proposing, Steve, but just not modal. And the reason I would say that is that I want to reserve that modal interaction for when the data changes from underneath the user and asking them, hey, do you want to force your changes or accept those other changes?
The reason why I don't like modal is because we're, unlike the notebook where essentially it is a modal interface, one notebook at a time. Yeah. Here we're dealing with multiple notebooks, and we really want to support being able to switch between multiple notebooks. So what happens in your sidebar editor if I switch notebooks? Does it update?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's really powerful to be able to copy settings from a cell in another notebook to the current notebook, to be able to switch, highlight, copy, switch back, highlight, paste. And that becomes, I think, a lot more difficult once you deal with modal, because anytime you deal with a modal, that pops you out of sort of your workflow and sort of interrupts your concentration, and interrupts your workflow.
Yeah, no, if it's not modal, it would be quite simple to copy metadata from notebook to notebook.
So the workflow would be copy, paste, commit, right?
Yeah. Right. Because that button would show up that would say commit or revert.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like the original sort of life cycle that Steve described, it covered our basic use case, and then when we have some like real time stuff going on, we might consider, all right, how do we make this more nuanced? But at least what Steve's discussed is not just feature parity; it's actually slightly nicer. Actually, substantially nicer when we talk about switching between multiple notebooks. But it's I imagine it's a pretty good place to introduce the feature, and then we can modify it as we go forward.
Yeah, I would say not just real time, but settings is on our roadmap now to have a good story for settings, and that's also going to influence us quite a bit. Can plugins provide toolbars? You said that there was a slideshow toolbar, that you're sort of experimenting with, and another toolbar. We already have the functionality for plugins to provide cell toolbars.
Yeah, the default plugin that is provided by the notebook plugin file is just assembling these things together. But yeah, a third party can come in and create a new cell tool that is either from the base cell tool or from this selector subclass that makes that part easier. And then just add it with a rank, and it'll show up in the appropriate location in the cell tools.
Nice.
Can those cell toolbars be collapsed?
Right now, no. There's no API for that. This is just basic. Yeah.
Okay. So I think your proposal sounds great for an initial iteration, and then we'll take a look at that in context of what we want to do with settings and what we want to do with real time.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just repeating what everyone else is saying.
Settings being an actual file that you're editing, so that would take the same semantics as files. And then we have real time.
What I'm saying is
we might have a nice editor for it. That's all.
Yeah.
Like we might decide that settings are special. They're not JSON files. They have some other MIME type, and we get a nicer editor or something.
Yeah, it might be that different plugins have different
JSON.
Yeah, but different plugins might own different keys in the settings dictionary, because each plugin has its own collection of settings, so it might provide its own UI for editing that. But you still want to edit it at a JSON level, so it's easy to copy and paste and just deal with things in a text format.
But I do really like what VS Code did on that front.
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice. Okay.
Well, or it's every plugin has their own JSON file, and that's what Sublime does. And then it's not namespaced in a higher file.
Okay.
I prefer to keep things at a file level if we can, because then we get all that free.
Yeah.
It's just another thing in the doc panel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I think the type of thing we could do if we want to embrace the file approach on a per plugin basis is have JSON schema for these config things that allows us to validate either as the user types or when they save. So I think that would help. We could also offer in principle completions based on that schema. And so I think the having JSON config schemas is going to go a long ways towards enabling us to offer sort of the VS Code style. It's still a file, but we give you a lot of extra goodness around that.
Steve, have you tackled the notebook metadata, the notebook level metadata?
No, there's an open issue for that. It's not marked beta. It's 1.0 right now. That one could either be another sidebar that shows up temporarily, and then has an X on it to close it, because I don't know. Do we want to keep populating these sidebars? Like modals are bad, but how do we have this concept of a transient sidebar?
Yeah, I mean, if it would be useful to be able to close a sidebar, like to exit so it no longer appears. That would help as sidebars grow.
I just
And
added
that's
the
just
ability to help. I mean, it's trivial to add commands to close, even if we don't have a nice place to put an X. Or we could just conventionally start putting toolbars on top of sidebars that close or whatever. But in terms of closing them, like it's fairly trivial to do, and at least putting it into menus is pretty easy to do.
Yeah, no, we could have like a sidebar top level menu that, allows us to add, enable and disable sidebars. That's a simple approach.
Okay. I'm going to say we have more to discuss on this, but maybe not at this second, unless Jason appears to want to say something.
I just wanted to say yes, and it sounds like you've got a good iteration and full speed ahead.
Okay. I guess that's it. I don't think I didn't actually look at the agenda since I came afterwards, but I think we're good.
I have one
Yeah.
other
Okay.
one other thing I wanted to bring up that actually is related to sidebars. So we've been talking, Min and I, Jess and Carol have been talking some about HubShare. So HubShare is going to be the Jupyter Hub service that provides the sharing of directories, basically. And the basic way to think about it is that you can take a directory in your Jupyter Notebook server and say, hey, I want to share this with people. It will get zipped up and copied to the HubShare service and then made available to those individuals. And they can then say, hey, oh, wow, Steve has shared this bundle with me, this directory. I want to just copy it into this other directory in my Jupyter Notebook server. And so it's all copy based. And from like a conceptual perspective, it's equivalent to something like Git, where you only track a single parent. So these directories know what parent they came from, but there's no merging. Basically, merge is simplified down to keep ours and keep theirs. And this is basically needed to match the semantics that we need for and be greater. So, but from a UI perspective, the hub, like working with HubShare in lab, you're going to need to look at the file browser and the HubShare panel that shows what things have been shared with you or what things you have shared with other people. And so, I think an optimal way of handling it would just be to drag things back and forth between those two panels. And so this is an example of another plugin that sort of works in conjunction with the file browser. And I can think of two other examples. One is the launcher, right? You sort of need to look at the launcher at the same time you look at the file browser. And that's sort of
what if we had a context menu on the sidebar that had the options of move to other side or close? That would satisfy both of these things.
Or a way to just tear off the tab and put it in the main dock area.
Well, that's more advanced. I was just thinking something simple.
Yeah. And then actually there's one other example of this type of panel, and that would be like a version control panel, right? Presumably, I mean, in Visual Studio Code, their file browser and their Git plugin are both in the left panel. But if you can show both of those at the same time, there's a lot more that you can do. And so I just think it's a general pattern that we're going to run into. And it would be great to have sort of a uniform way of handling these things. And maybe what you're proposing, Steve, is basically have a default side for a given panel but then allow users to switch sides or to close a panel temporarily.
I mean, we can use the drag drop API to drag these tabs. I mean, that is possible.
That would be really cool. But I mean, I think one reason we we've sort of been moving away from the right side panel is that there was no way to once you had something in the right side panel, it would always be there. Like you couldn't click X to get rid of it and collapse it. And if we
can do that with help.
Okay.
Yeah, because I found that super annoying. I realized as soon as we added state restoration, it was restored forever unless you cleared your application state.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I added a close. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. No, that was addressed now.
Okay. So, but if the user can freely move things back and forth between the left and right side panel and actually X something out that they're not using, I think if we did that, for example, I might advocate, I mean, we'd have to play with it, putting Paul's launcher on the right side panel so that you could always see it at the same time you see the file browser.
Well, the issue with moving things to the left was that even just having the sidebar there was taking up too much horizontal space. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean that was it on a typical laptop. And this would continue to be an issue if you have the left and the right side panels open. The dock panel is quite compact, and you're sort of limited to one panel wide. And so now on a big screen, having the left and the right is spectacular. I mean, it's very nice.
I don't know if we can do this right now, but I don't see a theoretical reason why we couldn't have you open the file browser, you start dragging a file, and you hover over the launcher tab, and the launcher opens, and then you drop it onto the bit of the launcher that you want, so that they're in the same sidebar, but you could just by dragging over something, you can get it to activate. Like on a Mac, you can drag a file, hold it over a folder, and if you just hold it, it opens that folder up so that you can drill down into it if you want.
Well, but
that would be the paradigm.
The launcher is for new entities, not existing entities, though, right?
Well, what if I want to drag I mean, this is a bad example because we have context menus, but suppose I have a file and I want to open it in the editor and I don't know that I can right click. Can I maybe drag the file over to the launcher on the sidebar and then on top of the file editor icon or something?
For the case of where there's multiple things that might open that entity.
But I mean, I'm not actually convinced because people really love to demo drag and drop, but I don't see people really using it much inside web. Like people often just refuse to believe that it's going to work inside a web page. So I've seen lots of drag and droppable features that people just don't use, and I wouldn't be surprised if we found in testing that people just aren't doing it.
Yeah, I think there's a small set of things where drag and drop makes sense, and for those cases it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think going overboard with it is not needed. I mean, it's something to just think about. I mean, the main place that this is affecting us right now is with the launcher, right? HubShare doesn't exist. We don't have version control. At some point we're going to have to decide: do we get rid of the old launcher that's in the dock panel? And once we do that, then you can't look at the current launcher and the file browser at the same time. So
yeah, no, that's fair. The current launcher, though, I don't know if you've noticed, it will only ever show if there's nothing else in your dock panel. So if you have a bunch of notebooks open, it won't show because you already know what you're doing. But if you close everything, when you refresh that page, it's going to show because it's assuming something should be in the dock panel.
Right.
I mean, for the launcher specifically, we could also take care of that by, I mean, right now we have in the file browser a new button. That new button actually dropped down the launcher widget instead of just, 3 things or whatever.
Yeah, we could make a list view of the launcher quite easily that was more more compact, and
Yep.
yeah, that wouldn't be difficult. Well, why don't we keep thinking about all this? I don't think there's any particular action items with it, but it's something that
Just for food for thought, I looked at what Cloud9 is doing on this, and when you right-click on either side, you get an option of all the available side panel items to show on a given side, and you can toggle them there. And what we could do is allow the user to show and hide on either side from that list, and then if there's nothing there, just have enough so that you can still right-click there, but minimize the space of that side panel. So it's still visible and you can right-click on it, but it doesn't take up horizontal space.
Or if you're going to do that, you could put a small little plus button or something.
Yeah. Yep. Do you have that up, and can you screen share it, Steve?
Yeah, I can screen share that.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I mean, I could have Cameron do a quick mock-up of something like this.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Workspace went away, and I can toggle it over here. Maybe. Oh, no, it showed up over there, but yeah, we'd make that a little better.
Gotcha.
But they still have, what if you get rid of all the tabs on one side? Like, does it completely collapse, or how does that work?
Outline. Yeah, it's gone.
Now, how do you put it? Yeah, how do you put it back?
So that right context menu affects that. Basically, they pin particular panels to particular sides. So if you go to the left panel,
Yeah, Steve, if you right click on the left panel and hit debugger, I bet it'll come up on the right side.
yeah, which is
okay.
That's a little
no,
confusing.
I don't think we want to do that.
yeah. But
I'm not convinced that that's bad because this is just where it goes, and you're in the sidebars. If there were some visual indicator inside that right-click context menu that showed what side it was on, I think that would have been sufficient.
Can you
like
drag
if there was
it?
a little
No,
Can you drag it
doesn't
over
work.
to the other side? Oh, okay.
No. They're fixed to a side, but whether they're shown or not is toggleable.
And their command palette, does it actually push over the window? Yeah, okay. So you have this jittering that we've talked about before too, where if you do command palette, all of a sudden all your windows resize and then come back again.
okay. I mean, we could have something like a little icon below all the open tabs that pulls up some sort of menu like that.
Yeah.
I think having some visual indicator is nice. It's more discoverable, but also we could show that indicator when the sidebar is completely gone. Like have some little plus tab that sticks out.
Or we could just make that part of the Jupyter icon up at the very, very top by the menu or something. Like sidebars, click on the Jupyter icon and then there's a add sidebar or something.
I mean,
yeah, but there's a really strong intuition what the top left icon does. For most people, that intuition takes me to a web page.
yeah.
Right, but we're an application, right? We're not a web page.
I understand. I totally agree, but I'm just saying there will be conflicting intuitions. Is it your Apple menu in the top left, or is it that thing that always takes me to the main homepage of the organization?
Yeah.
Right. Does it take you to the main homepage of the organization right now?
The JupyterLab link?
Yeah. The
Check.
JupyterLab icon in the upper left.
Does nothing right now.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, taking you to the main homepage is pretty much useless, but
Yes.
but dropping down a menu saying application settings, like the Apple icon or something, where you have a menu option that says sidebars.
I don't disagree with you about its utility. I'm just concerned about its discoverability.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Because I'm used to ignoring that. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually having a view menu with the sidebar submenu or something would be a lot more discoverable. Yeah.
All right. We are just about
the sidebar
time.
Good job, Darian.
No, I mean, yeah, we have 2 minutes left. So maybe if you have a final point you want to make, now's the time.
I was just going to say the sidebar in Sublime is toggleable through the view menu, so that is an option too.
Okay.
Okay. Well, good discussion. I think that we have a lot to go on before. We have a lot we can do basically for beta already, but yeah, some of this stuff is going to have to be ongoing. But thank you everyone for joining the meeting, and I think we can stop recording.
Sorry.
Oh, you do have one.
Yeah. So I was having some connection issues here, so a lot of the stuff on Cloud9 wasn't captured. I don't know if it was captured on the video or not, so you might want to flesh out the notes a little bit there to help you follow the conversation. So,
Cool.
Sorry.
All right.
Just have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.